And I froze a little bit there, of course. I think Troy did too. So we're just chit-chatting. I think Troy's still frozen up. So while he's frozen, I'll just lead us in. I'm Shannon Bowring, aka Shannon Stride. Sometimes I go by my maiden name and sometimes my married name. It's kind of a crapshoot what I decide at any given moment. And welcome to another episode of Stonehouse Reader Series, which was started up by Troy Myers and Amanda Pleau about a year ago in response to the pandemic and the need for a writing community and to feel connected to the Stonecoast community that we've built up together. And they graciously invited me on after I graduated just a couple months ago. And we're always looking for readers, so Stonecoasters, past, present, faculty, students, get in touch with us, and we'll see if we can schedule you. And we always say hello to parents who are watching. Hello, parents. Thank you for your support. And tonight I'm very excited because we are hosting one of my very good friends, Aimee Degroat, who is a fellow fiction writer. And Aimee and I go way back. You graduated 21, right? Fiction 21?
21, yes.
I think you were one semester ahead of me.
One semester, yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we worked together on the Stonecoast Review. We were both editor-in-chief, obviously not at the same time, but she was my trailblazer at the review, and it was so much fun to work with you. And I'm so excited that you came on to chat with us. So can you want to tell us just a little bit about where you are and what you write about and why you write about it?
Sure. My name is Aimee Degroat, and I write fiction, and I live in Maine, and I like to write about Maine because it is the place dearest to my heart.
Same.
Yeah. I like to write about poor rural communities, although this story today is not about one of those, because that is also dear to my heart, and class issues are very important to me.
Yeah. Yes, they are. And I've been fortunate enough to read a lot of Aimee's work, and it's very true. I remember you and I had a long conversation once about you wanted to write about dental care and how people don't understand that that's not available to those in lower class.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not considered part of health insurance. It's totally separate. And if you are poor, then a lot of times you don't have teeth, and that's just the way it works.
Yeah, I think about that every time I go to the dentist now, which I hate, but I feel so fortunate that I can do it.
Yes.
And you have some very exciting news, don't you? You just had a piece accepted for publication somewhere?
I did. I have a piece coming out in Hearth and Coffin tomorrow. It is a short microfiction flash piece that I know you've read it in its earlier stages. Very creepy from the point of view of a serial killer. Not what I usually write, but it just came from somewhere, so it's out there.
I'm very into true crime, so I really like it. And what will you be reading for us tonight?
Tonight, I'm going to be reading a excerpt / condensed version of a news story hot off the press called Silver Bullet.
Oh, okay. And we are hoping that Carina Bissett will join us, but as for right now, we don't know if she's having technical difficulties. So while we're waiting for her to come on or not come on, we'll just have Aimee running the show. So if we're ready to read, we are ready to listen.
Okay. I am ready to read.
Great. And we'll bring you back on after and chat a little bit more.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, take it away.
All right. So this story is quite condensed. So I'll just say at the beginning that you don't really need to know anything to know what's going on in the story at the start, except that the main character is sitting in a cafe with her mother, and they're listening to the album Quadrophenia, which is playing in the cafe. And the woman's husband has just died. What Angie wanted was to sink into time soup again, to swim away into 1,000 memories of Danny and the rain. Rain on a hike in Maine, bushwhacking into underbrush to find the trail. Rain while canoeing on a lake in British Columbia, their scarlet boat slicing through turquoise waters, and Danny yelling, "Pull!" Rain while they waited for the buzzer to go off, sitting on a rock wall outside Olive Garden. Good luck rain on their wedding, laughing and running for the food tent, screaming, "I do, I do." I need to get back home to cool, cool rain, Angie sang. We don't have to talk about it, Mom said, and stuck a piece of donut into her mouth. A blob of frosting slid south from her lips, leaving behind a thin brown stripe. Later, unsleeping, up at midnight, Angie went after a glass of water and caught Mum leaning into a closet at the foot of the stairs. A fist of fear seized her chest. She snatched the hefty bag out of her mother's hands and upended it. Danny's running shoes thunked onto the hardwood, followed by his raincoat. "I'm trying to help you, dear," Mum said. "Your house is a disaster." So what? The clutter always bothered her when Danny was alive, but now seeing his things spread around the house brought her comfort. Pieces of her husband greeted her from every room. He was alive in his flannel on the coat hook, his boots beside the boot tray, his guitars leaning in corners, the last book he read, never to be finished, face down on the coffee table. When Mum finally flew back to California a few days later, Angie was relieved. She'd been afraid to sleep after the trash bag incident. What if Mum threw away something irreplaceable like the napkin Danny had used on the day he died, then left on the table beside his dirty dish? Preservation, she realized, was key. She refused to wash Danny's dirty clothes. Instead, she folded them up and placed them in a plastic tote. No one need know how long she contemplated his dirty boxers before placing her nose inside the P-flap and inhaling urine, yes, but also ball sweat, sour as cheap coffee, the faintest trace of pubic hair, and the musky male scent that was all Dan. His coat was a sacrificial lamb. The one article of his clothing she let herself wear, and she floated around in it like a ghost, her hands lost inside the sleeves. In the bathroom, she found unexpected and valuable treasure. His full electric razor made her chest ache with the weight of uncried tears. She emptied his beard clippings into a Ziploc bag and inhaled. Transported to a memory of her lips against Danny's cheek, his coarse beard against her palm. When she found his toothbrush, she closed her lips around the entire head, sucking on the bristles until her cheeks hurt, holding the mushroomy flavor of the bathroom on her tongue until it distilled down into Danny's breath. The bed sheets hadn't been washed in weeks, and Danny smells lay trapped beneath the covers. Dirty hair on the pillow, stale bed farts in the middle, and the cheesy smell of his feet near the bottom. She built a barricade of pillows down the center of the bed to prevent her from rolling over in her sleep and contaminating Danny's smells with her own. If she shut off the light, she could almost trick herself into believing he was on the other side. When the room was very dark, she inhaled his scent, placed her hand on the lumpy pillow wall, and talked about her day. "Something got into the trash again, Dan," she said. "Fucking trash pandas, I know." She stayed awake until dawn, waiting for his response. Most of her days were spent watching television and Googling. One of her favorite finds was a human interest piece in the Sun Journal about a veteran whose home had been repaired by a local volunteer group. In one of the accompanying pictures, Danny stood on a ladder, goofy overalls, deadhead t-shirt, nails in his mouth, hammer mid-swing. Her least favorite picture was one of Danny, clean-shaven and in a suit, stepping out the front door of St. Rosa, Lima, hand in hand with his first wife, Beth. 3 months went by. Angie refused to go out. She threw her trash into the garage. There was plenty of room with only her car in there. She liked to wind up her arm and see how far she could launch a bag. One made it as far as the hood of her Subaru and split open, spilling potato peelings and eggshells. What did she care? She wasn't going anywhere. One Thursday, she was opening the bag of razor clippings for a sniff when someone knocked at the door. She peeked out onto the front porch and saw a man standing on her welcome mat. Hat in hand, he ground his thumb into the brim and shifted his weight from one leg to the other. No, thank you, Angie called out. The man on the porch looked up at the ceiling, then put his cap back on. I know you're in there, he said. We need to talk. No, thank you, she said louder and with more conviction. The man half turned toward the road. I'll come back later, he said. Angie watched from behind the curtains until he reached the end of the driveway. Being alone was so difficult to navigate. A dog would be nice. Any warm creature to lean against her side as she reached for the pull chain in the musty dark of the attic stairs. That was the plan for the day, tackling the attic. She hoped to find something that might still retain Danny's smell. He was dissipating. A week ago, she had found an ancient Playboy stuffed in a basement desk drawer. The dark-haired centerfold reclined on a velvet purple couch, her mouth a wide scarlet O of surprise. One leg slung over the back of the settee, one foot on the floor. Angie stuck her nose into the crease that ran across Miss March's belly button and inhaled, but all she smelled was magazine. She'd been lying to herself for weeks about the toothbrush. The taste of her husband could not be extracted anymore, no matter how hard she sucked. And his beard trimmings now had the flat plastic smell of the Ziploc bag. Placing his dirty clothes all in one tote had been a bad idea. Everything smelled like grungy socks, and, like the beard trimmings, could have belonged to anyone. The attic floor was a sea of junk. Cardboard boxes with Beth written on the side were stacked under the eaves closest to the stairwell. Danny hadn't talked much about his first wife, except to say she had died of cancer and that it was unexpected. Angie always had the impression that anything concerning Beth was sacred. Angie's best friend Mandy said, I can't believe you haven't snooped through her stuff. I would have peeked ages ago. Angie recalled the few times Danny had mentioned Beth. His dopey look of reverence led her to believe he had loved Beth a tiny bit more than he loved her. But suspecting and knowing were two very different things. There were some questions better left unanswered. But what if there was something of her husband left in the boxes? An artifact so dear and so purely him would give her something new to bring in bed at night. Danny's college football helmet was buried in one box, wrapped in brown packing paper. She checked it for spiders, plunked it on her head, then breathed in long and slow. Are you in here, babe? She whispered. But the air inside the helmet tasted like pencil shavings. Nothing of her husband remained. In another box, she found a plastic lightsaber, the kind they sold at the circus made up of interlocking plastic cones. One flick of her wrist, and the saber extended 4 feet out in front of her. Shwam, she said, and sliced sideways through the dust motes. Something rustled in the rafters. Mouse or bat, she couldn't tell. Behind all the boxes was a chest filled with lingerie. Angie unfolded a teddy with a matching lace thong and held the panties up to the light. Had Danny ever grown desperate for the smell of Beth? Had he snuck up here and sniffed these same panties, hoping to recapture his dead wife's fading essence? Did he place his penis in the soft, silky folds, picture Beth, and release himself into her memory? The red underwear flashed outside of the helmet, tempting Angie like a matador's cape. Why else had he kept this stuff? She pushed the bit of silk through the face mask, buried her nose in the crotch, and took a long sniff. No Danny. No Beth, just mildewed nylon. She dumped the box onto the throwaway pile, and a vibrator, metallic, a foot long, fell out and landed at her feet with a thunk. Angie had never found such things titillating, but maybe Danny had enjoyed things like sex toys, nudie magazines, and naughty undies. Sex with Beth must have been wilder, sexier, stranger. Dan might have preferred that. She could picture him up here, holding the dildo and touching Beth's things, reminiscing. She almost quit for the day, but then she came upon a box of Danny's records. Dark Side of the Moon, Sgt. Pepper's, and his favorite, Quadrophenia. Can you see the real me? Angie sang. The first time Angie ever saw Dan, he was on stage. By day, he'd been a high school music teacher. At night, he played guitar for a Who cover band. The music helped him heal after Beth died, he told her. On weekends, he gave private guitar lessons. Back then, she'd wondered if there was room in Dan's life for her. Soon, Angie had the record player hooked up to speakers. She lowered the needle and felt herself sink again into memory. Their first date. Dan had talked her into going to Oldies night at the drive-in. The theater had a special showing of Quadrophenia. The rain came on so fierce that night they could barely see the screen. She sang along with the Who while she cooked her dinner, and soon a beef stew bubbled away on the stove, the vent on high. She found a box of brownie mix. The kitchen grew hot, so she took off Danny's coat and danced naked around the kitchen, wearing only her slippers and the helmet, mixer in hand, bowl in the other. Flecks of chocolate peppered her breasts as she danced and sang. A tapping sound came from the front of the house as she slid the brownies into the oven. That would be the raccoons. As the trash pile in the garage grew, the little bastards had grown bolder. Yesterday, the screen door rattled, and when she looked out onto the porch, one was standing on his hind legs, watching her with dark eyes, sniffing the air. Every night now, it sounded like a dozen of them were setting up shop in the garage, chirping and growling at each other. They made quite the mess, too, tearing open bags, spilling wet trash all over the floor. She picked up her lightsaber with a flick of her wrist, extended it full length before going out into the living room to investigate. The man from before stood on the front porch. He leaned to the side and tapped on the window, his face pressed against the wavy single-pane glass. One eye, the electric color of blue jays, peered in at her through the thin gauzy curtains. "No, thank you," Angie called out, the lightsaber extended in front of her, legs spread, her deflated middle-aged breast jiggling above her pallid belly. A blob of chocolate coated her right nipple like a pasty. "I'd like to talk to you about Danny," the man said. She left him standing on the porch while she went back into the kitchen for a jacket. If this man had a message about her dead husband, Angie needed to hear it. She crept back out to the living room. "What do you want?" she called out, the coat buttoned to her neck, legs spread wide, the puke green lightsaber extended in front of her again. "Can you open the door so we can talk?" the man said. "This rain is coming on sideways out here, and I'm getting wet." Oh, the rain. She remembered that time it rained on their vacation in Mexico, and they sheltered under that palm tree, slow dancing, her arms around Danny's neck as they sang to each other, and it felt like they were the only two people left in the world. "Like that first date at the drive-in," she said. "I can't hear you," the man said. They had kept the wipers on high through most of the movie, and the sound of their swish sounded like a baby's heartbeat in utero. Heat lightning flashed across the nearby hills. She had understood how music was a vital part of who Danny was, and she had wanted to feel what he was feeling. When the credits rolled, their car was the last one left on the lot. Danny cupped the back of her neck with his palm as the rain hammered on the roof, their cheeks sore from grinning, breath sweet from the whiskey they shared. Somehow the album was down to the end of side one, and the strange man was once again walking away from her. Time had slipped forward again, jarringly, like stepping on a bicycle pedal and skipping a gear. The following day, Angie returned to the attic. When she bagged up shit to throw away, Beth's vibrator fell out and rolled across the floor. Angie didn't want to touch it. She also didn't want to leave it. What if she were to die tomorrow and some charitable organization like the Catholic Church downtown swooped in to clean things up and saw its metallic, naughty shine? What would her mother think if she discovered this electric silver bullet sparkling in the dust and cobwebs? Angie grabbed the shaft, which was cold and filled her fist. She felt a catty sort of sympathy for Beth, who must have been built like a clown car, tiny on the outside, roomy in the vagina. The bats in the rafters made a high-pitched chittering sound as Angie reached for the on switch, but when she looked up, she saw it was not a bat at all, but a raccoon peeking out from behind a computer monitor. "Why, hello, you," Angie said. The raccoon's eyes were dark and shiny as licorice beans. He stood up on his hind legs and sniffed the air, then brought his paws up to his chest like he was praying. Adorable. She could see why people kept them as pets. "How'd you get in here?" The raccoon bared its teeth and hissed, then made a barking sound that skittered up her spine. Downstairs, someone banged on the door. "You've got to be fucking kidding me," Angie said. She took one step backward toward the staircase. The raccoon dropped all fours and took 2 steps toward her, its belly swaying from side to side. The fur was mangy-looking, and the animal had a bald patch between its shoulders. A nasty raw wound marred its back leg. Someone banged on the front door again. Angie brandished the dildo at the raccoon. "Get back, you," she said. Bang, bang, bang! The flat of someone's hand against the tin of the screen door. "Come in," Angie hollered. "For fuck's sake, come in." The raccoon was not a fan of the yelling. Who knew raccoons had so many sharp teeth? Hello? A man's voice called out from downstairs. I can't come down, she said. I'm being held captive by a rabid raccoon. The raccoon yipped. When Angie took another step backward, the little beast tilted its head and whined. Come again? The man hollered from down below. I can't hear you over this music. Rabid raccoon, she screeched. The raccoon hissed and snapped at the air, teeth clicking together, eyes wet and gummy. Downstairs, the screen door slammed. Great, they'd left. She'd have to figure this out on her own. The raccoon was 10 feet away now, and she could smell it. How had she not noticed this before? The beast gave off the cloying sweet smell of dying things, like rotten chicken mixed with roadkill skunk. Angie's thumb found the power button on the vibrator, but the batteries had long since died. Vroom, vroom, she said, and swung it back and forth in an arc. The light reflected off the metal staff. Down below, all she could hear was the record player, Quadrophenia still. She'd been listening to the album on repeat. Someone would eventually come looking for her, and when they did, the record would probably still be spinning, the needle skipping at the end. Thwick, thwick, thwick. They'd find Angie sprawled out on the attic floor, half-eaten by raccoons, a giant dildo clenched in her hand. The thump of footsteps approaching sounded like a drumbeat, and it took her a minute to realize her visitor was still around after all. Any other day, the sight of some strange man running up her attic stairs with a shovel would have filled her with panic. Now she was filled with relief. Get behind me and go downstairs, the man said. You don't want to see this. The raccoon backed up. Angie knew from experience that if she didn't witness this death, she wouldn't really fully believe it had happened, and she couldn't live downstairs without knowing for certain the creature was gone. Give me the shovel, she said. Miss, I'll take care of this. Here, I'll trade you. She handed the man the dildo. He took it without comment and handed her the spade. The killing didn't take long, but she almost chickened out when she recognized the creature's sorry state. Scrawny, scared, alone. But then its putrid stink enveloped her. The raccoon bared its teeth one more time, and she brought the shovel down fast. The handle reverberated in her palms when it hit. Angie knew she would confess all these details to Dan later. She would stroke the pillow wall, tell him about the splinter in her hand and that pop of color, blood in one raccoon iris before its eyes went flat. She scooped up the animal and motioned to the man to hold the garbage bag open. Raccoon fur sliding against the plastic made a hissing sound like the driving rain against hot pavement. The bag only weighed a couple pounds. She wondered if Danny weighed less after he died. The accident messed him up pretty bad. They couldn't have an open casket. Thank you, Angie said. You can keep that vibrator if you want, or you could throw it away, your choice. The man tossed it in the bag and wiped his hands on his pant leg. Come downstairs. I'll get us coffee, Angie said. The man sat at the table while she rinsed mugs. Her nose prickled. Her normal kitchen smells, coffee and the rotting trash from the garage, the stench leaking in despite her best efforts, mingled with the man's rich aroma of hay, cow manure, and fabric softener. I liked your husband, he said. The plate from Danny's last meal was still on the table and had grown a nice patch of furry green mold, but the man didn't seem to notice. You knew Danny? He did some carpentry work for me. Now she knew why the man looked familiar. Danny up on a ladder. Later in the article, a picture of this man, the local veteran. My name's Tommy. Your husband was teaching me how to play guitar before he passed. Oh, yes, I remember him mentioning you. Danny had many clients, and she couldn't keep track of them all, but he had mentioned a Tommy, she was sure of it. She reheated the leftover beef stew while Tommy spoke about his farm and his cows. He told her he never married. Came close once, Tommy said. I don't mind much being alone. I've got my animals and my music. He told her about joining the army out of high school, then about Afghanistan, the friends who died there, and how when he came home, the town had changed, like he had stepped into a timeless void and came back to find out everyone had moved on without him. He talked about buying the farm and how devilish his cows could be. They get out sometimes, he said. I try and stay on top of it. Then he spoke about Danny and their shared love of music. As they ate dinner together, she talked about her marriage. She told him about Beth and the vibrator. She told him about Mandy and her mother. They mean well, Angie said. Things were tough for Mom after my dad died. After dinner, she packed him up some brownies to take home, and Tommy offered to recommend an exterminator. He also offered to come back the following day with his John Deere and mow the lawn. When he stood to leave, he reached into his coat pocket and brought out a wallet. I've been coming over so I could give you this. Is that Danny's? I didn't want to just leave it on the porch. I found it by my mailbox the day after his car accident. Why did you wait so many months to bring it back? Your husband hit my cow. That's the other reason I'm here, to tell you I'm sorry. Tommy took his hat off and rubbed the back of his head. It was all my fault, and I'm just so fucking sorry. Behind him, the kitchen counters were piled with unread mail and food-crusted dishes. Sauce spatter encrusted the white enamel of the stove. The house had gotten away from her. Time had gotten away from her, and her grief had gotten away from her. But she could do this one small good thing. The accident wasn't your fault, you know. Dan was on his way home from a gig. He wasn't drunk or anything, but the cop said he'd been drinking. An empty Coors bottle rolled up under his brake pedal. He couldn't stop. The lie slid easily off her tongue. Is that true? She squeezed Tommy's hand. He was always careless. He was speeding, and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. These 3 things were true. Danny never wore his seatbelt, and he'd been rushing home to see her. He had always been excited to see her. After Tommy left, Angie cleaned up dinner. Once she started moving, she couldn't stop. She cleared off the counters, then moved on to the living room, where the record was still spinning. She put the needle back to the start and danced and sang as she cleaned. Tommy was right. Being alone was okay, but she felt like she made a new friend, and that was very good indeed. Tomorrow she would call Mum and plan a visit. Angie could almost smell the West Coast, eucalyptus trees, the ocean air, and her mother, who always smelled like pancakes. She returned to the wallet and pressed it against her nose. She caught the faintest whiff of Drakkar Noir and cow manure. Inside was a picture of her and Danny together on the front porch. Beth's picture might have been hidden behind it, deep within the folds of old leather, but that wouldn't change a thing, and she didn't bother to look. Loneliness starts sinking in, but I am one, Angie sang to her empty house, and finally felt the hot tears burn her eyes. This had been Danny's last song, the one his band always pulled out of their hat for the cheering crowd's encore. And I can see this is me, and I will be. You'll all see I'm the one. She sang to the raccoons, to the bats. She sang it to Beth and Tommy. She sang it to Danny. She sang his fucking music to the rafters. The end.
Okay, hold on one second. Okay, we're having many technical difficulties tonight, so I apologize.
Oh!
While you were reading, there was all this chaos going on behind the scene. So Troy keeps losing internet out in California, so it's just you and me right now. And Amanda's been kind of running interference in the background, making sure that I can be on camera with you. So apologies. And Carina will not be making it tonight. She's not feeling well. So we will reschedule her time to come read. So it's just you and me here, Aimee.
Well, all right.
Let's just chat like old friends.
Just like old friends.
I loved that. You're so good at making that story could so easily be farcical and absurd, but it just feels natural when you're writing it. Like, of course she's battling a raccoon with a vibrator. Like, of course she is. And you raise a legitimate question. What do you do with old vibrators? What do you do? Where do they go? These are important questions we need to ask.
They are important questions, yes.
But that aside, you're so good at sensory writing. There's just, especially the smells in this one, so visceral. that's why that's one of the things I've always loved about your writing is just you're so immersed in the senses of your characters.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I love that the dark humor, and you're so good at there's such deep emotion running behind this seemingly comical scene. And you're just so good at doing that. I don't like this question, but I always like wonder it. And when people ask me, I have a weird, how did you come up with this story? Where did the idea come from?
Well, so I wanted to, this is going to sound really weird, but I wanted to write about COVID without talking about COVID. And I think that the pandemic has made us become very resourceful because we can do things like this, right? We're talking via Zoom and we're having this great conversation. And there's a lot of community that has developed online. But we have missed so much. And some of the things that we've missed are things like taste and smell and hearing live music. And I wanted to write about that loss because I think that especially the younger generation who are in school or just, graduating from high school or college, that they are experiencing this grief that there's no way to express because everybody's so busy trying to cope that they're not dealing with that grief of having lost these 2 years, lost all these senses for 2 years. And even like the bad smells are good, can be good things, they can be good things because we're missing them right now, well.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think you did it beautifully. And I love the singing. I just love to hear you sing because you're, in addition to being a writer, and you're also a musician. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
And I think you've put musical influences in some of your other things I've read, but this was clearly a very Who central thing. I loved it. Were those songs in particular, like the character named Tommy? I'm assuming that was not unintentional.
Correct. That was intentional. Yeah.
Yeah. You and I love a good Easter egg like that.
Exactly. And I have always, it's funny, that these characters come to you and that maybe it's something that's not particularly something that's in your wheelhouse, but it's something that the character likes. Like, the story that I wrote before this, the character was really into this Billy Joel album. And I had never listened to that Billy Joel album, but the character liked it. So I had to write about it, and this, I mean, I love The Who, but I've always been a big Tommy fan, and I've never watched the movie Quadrophenia, but these characters, it was their thing,
Yeah.
So, and it is a great album. So
yeah, it is. And in the chat, Amanda is asking, do you have plans for that story? Are you going to turn it into a longer story? Is it going to be a standalone piece? Are you going to try to get that one published?
Yeah, I am submitting it out. It is a much longer story. This is a very condensed version. This is about half of the full story.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more I would say mostly what I cut out was like extra detail, and feelings and things like that, and to get down to the core of the story. But it's about twice as long as what I read. And I am submitting it out. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But it won't be like a novel.
Can you send it to me so I can read the whole thing?
Yes.
Yay. And Troy is back. Hello.
Yeah, Aimee, I just heard a little bit of it. I heard the part about a dildo and a raccoon. And I'm really bummed I missed the rest of the story.
That's the best time to come in.
It's the first time it's happened in almost a year and a half. My internet just went down. I had trouble getting it back online. I'm trying to get a hotspot set up. So I'm sorry I was gone for most of it, but Shannon said, come on back and say hi. So here I am. Thank you for reading.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about life post MFA. And you and I are still pretty fresh out of it. You're just about half a year. I'm a couple months. How has it been for you so far, Aimee? Do you still feel relatively connected to the Stonecoast community, and are you still writing? I think you're writing regularly. We've had a lot of emails about it and texts about how awful and terrible and wonderful writing can be.
It is all of those things. Yes, yes. I write every single day. I make it a
Yeah.
point to write every single day. Even if it's just one sentence, I write every day. And I think that it was Ron Curry who said, that it's a muscle and that you have to do it. It might not have been him, but I think it was him.
I think it was
That
him.
yeah, and that you just have to make it a point and a practice to do it. And the more you do it and exercise that muscle, that the better that you'll get. So I make it a point to do that, and I write every day. And a lot of times, what I'm writing is just cutting apart something that I've already written, because part of the problem I found with going through an MFA program is it's like a blessing and a curse in that by the end of the program, you realize how much the stuff you wrote at the beginning of the program sucked. And so
Oh God, yes.
you're going back and just tearing this stuff apart. So I had a novel that was maybe 3/4 of the way done. And then I cut it back to half of that. And now I've cut it back again. So I'm kind of reworking that whole thing and hopefully massaging it into something great so that I don't have to scrap the whole thing and start over. But, yeah.
Are you in any writers groups or a local, are you, remind me, I don't think so, no.
I am not. No, I am not. I probably should be, but I'm just so busy. As soon as I get home from work, I make dinner, I walk the dog, and then I write until I go to bed, and I just do it every single day.
Yeah. What about you, Troy? Do you have other than your Stonecoast community, what do you have post MFA that keeps you
I
inspired?
have envy for Aimee's structure and work ethic. And sorry about the phone. Trying to set up a hotspot in case I get dumped again, connection wise, which if I disappear, that's what happened. But I came out of the MFA and I teach community college, and I was moving into a temporary job there, President Academic Senate, where I taught one class. It was very consuming, 2.5 years. So I didn't really start writing much again until we started this series. And this just reminded me of what that part of me was about, So I would like to get into a writer's group. I've been kind of working on my own. This has felt like my family and my motivation for me. This reminds me to write. Every time someone comes on here and they're published, I'm thinking, oh gosh, I need to step up. But I'm working on that long poem right now, and I work on that whenever I get time. And there is, I like what you said, Aimee, about revision, because it's the balance between going back and revising and writing new work. That's hard for me. I've got 60 pages of this poem, and I'm thinking, okay, should I stop and go back and clean up, or do I keep blasting ahead? And it's tough. So yeah, I don't know if that's a very good answer, but I do not have that kind of structure. So I dig in when I can. I always like it when I can, though. Always feels good to write.
It does. Yeah,
it does.
I'm in a writing rut. I haven't written for about a week, and I'm feeling it.
Wow.
Feeling it hard. Yeah.
That's still good, though. A week? I've gone years, so a week.
It feels like years.
You're so active. Aimee, do you have work out? I missed your whole intro and everything. Did the story you read, was it published? Are you publishing, or are you just working on stuff?
This one is brand new. I just wrote this story, and I have started submitting it out. It's not accepted anywhere yet, but I do have a piece that's coming out tomorrow in Hearth and Coffin.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, it's a short, little, creepy, weird piece.
Cool.
Yeah. I love those.
Really not like my other stuff.
Those are good. Very cool.
And will you share the link with everyone when it goes online
Yeah.
and people have access to it? Great.
Absolutely. Yep.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So speaking of submitting, you and I we both worked on Stonecoast Review.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would feel weird if we didn't plug Stonecoast Review and literary journals in general. So let's do a quick plug for that. Let's hear what you have to say about that, and then we'll try to wrap things up a little bit.
Stonecoast Review is an excellent literary magazine. Submit to them. I think they have a theme this issue where they're focusing on Ukraine and what's going on over there. But I encourage everybody to submit anything that you have. They like experimental poetry, fiction, nonfiction, whatever. If you're in the Stonecoast program right now, I encourage anybody who's not working on the Stonecoast Review to talk to the editors there, which are Elliot and Kate, I believe, and talk to them about being part of it, whether you're a reader just reading work or whether you're an editor or want to be an editor in the future. I started there as a first reader and then went on to be an editor and then editor-in-chief, as I think Shannon did the same path. And reading work that other people submit has been so beneficial to writing my own work and submitting.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn a lot about the entire process, and you learn a lot about why your work might be getting rejected and what can help you get your work accepted. So that's our little plug. Submit to literary journals, especially the Stonecoast Review.
Wow. That's fascinating insight.
Yeah. It was a great experience working together, and
And it takes, you don't have to have gone to Stonecoast to submit. It's just a national.
No.
Yeah.
It's national to everyone.
Yeah. Cool.
And so next week we have reading, is it Josh Davis and Allison Blevins, who do they have the joint poetry book coming out next week?
Yeah. So I cannot thank you enough tonight, Aimee and Shannon, for putting through the weirdest night we have had in this show. And Amanda, who's in the background, who I texted and who rescued me technologically a little bit. Yeah. But so Josh has been on before. He and Allison wrote in Google Docs, as I understand it, he'll talk about it, a book at the same time together.
Yeah.
So they would collaborate on a poem, write a stanza, another stanza. So it's a joint effort and it's published. It's coming out. So I'm excited to hear what he brings. Yeah.
Yeah. Aimee, maybe that's what you and I have to do next. We'll do a tag writing project together so that you
love it.
Get off my ass and write, so I'm not just watching Grey's Anatomy and wasting my time.
I love it. But you have a book coming out.
Well, it's going to be, my agent's going to start shopping it in a couple weeks.
Nice.
So
I did not know that, Shannon. Is it short fiction? I did not know that. Is it a collection of short fiction or a novel?
So it was my thesis, and it was a linked fiction collection, like in the vein of Olive Kittredge or Winesburg, Ohio.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Just all these characters in one town based on the town where I grew up in northern Maine. But I kind of streamlined it a little bit so it reads more like a traditional novel. In my head, it's always going to be a collection of fiction, but marketing wise, you want to say novel to sell that puppy. So it's a novel.
Okay. When I get my first book of poems shopped, I'm going to call it a novel.
Yeah, right. Just call everything a novel.
Verse novel.
Exactly. So so that will be, it's getting shopped soon. So, but it will be a long time before I have any news about that, I think.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful, Shannon, you joined our team. Tonight would have been just Aimee stuck in that room by herself.
If anyone could handle it, she could.
Just keep reading.
Yeah. Just keep going. Thank you for coming tonight, Aimee. It was great to see you and hear your work again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was very fun.
All right. So we will come back next week with Josh Davis and Allison Blevins. Thank you, everyone. Have a great.
Karina was ill tonight, by the way.
Yes.
I don't know if you
I
saw
hope
that.
she'll come. We'll have to reschedule her. Yeah.
So we'll reschedule her as well.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.